Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And whenever I review a movie from Marvel Studios, I find myself assessing it with a very unique standard. I think many fans, critics, and casual movie buffs alike do the same thing these days. Because, let's face it, Marvel Studios has achieved such unprecedented success that we can't judge it the same way we judge another franchise. This isn't your typical movie trilogy, nor is it your typical studio brand. This incredible cinematic universe has done things no other franchise or studio has ever done before. And they've managed to keep succeeding and build on what they've created, exploring, expanding, and redefining this marvelous world of heroes, villains, and everything in between. And that's why assessing a movie like Eternals is uniquely challenging. It was always going to be challenging from the moment it was first announced. Because even if you're a hardcore Marvel fan, chances are you don't know much about the Eternals. Now, I've been reading Marvel comics for years, and I barely know the basics. I knew they were one of Jack Kirby's most ambitious creations, but aside from a few references here or there, they haven't played a significant role in the mainline comics for years. Now, this movie, under director Chloe Zhao, seeks to bring these characters to a wider audience in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And on top of all that, it attempts to do so by deviating significantly from the typical Marvel Studios formula. It's ambitious to say the least. It's also risky, daring to try something other than what has worked so well for over a decade now. And if you've been on YouTube lately, or if you've seen any of the critical reviews, you've probably seen some strong opinions, if I'm being polite. You see, Eternals as a whole is a different kind of superhero movie, built around a diverse cast of eclectic characters, few of whom will draw parallels with more classic superheroes. It's also a movie that really emphasizes world building, molding a whole new history for the MCU. And to achieve what it seeks, it simply cannot use that standard Marvel Studios formula. It must craft its own. And after seeing the movie and taking some time to process it all, I am ready to give my full take on it. But before I do, I want to give a standard spoiler warning, but for this particular movie, the spoilers will be a lot more impactful than usual. That's because some of the biggest revelations in this movie also make for some of its most defining moments. And trust me, once you see it, you'll know what I mean. Now, having given that warning, I also want to make another thing clear. This movie should not be judged by its Rotten Tomatoes score. Hell, no movie should. I've always been of the opinion that people should just see movies for themselves and be their own critic. And not since Star Wars The Last Jedi has a movie's tomato meter score been so heavily scrutinized. But on some levels, I can understand the added scrutiny. Because, like I said, Eternals is a really different kind of superhero movie. These heroes just don't follow the same path as Iron Man, Spider-Man, or even Shang-Chi. Theirs is a unique journey, but it's one I still found genuinely compelling. The premise of Eternals is very much in keeping with the themes and aesthetics established by Jack Kirby. Over 7,000 years ago, the celestial Arishem sent 10 uniquely powerful beings to Earth. They include Circe, Icarus, Athena, Ajax, Kingo, Sprite, Phastos, Makari, Druig, and Gilgamesh. Together, they are tasked with fighting the Deviants, a race of monstrous creatures who were also created by the Celestials. But they had since evolved into these powerful, unstoppable killing machines, capable of wiping out any form of sentient life. And when the Eternals first arrive on Earth, they make a hell of an impression on early humanity. Beyond simply fighting the Deviants and saving the lives of early humans, they are embraced and celebrated by the people. And in turn, the Eternals quickly become immersed in humanity's early development, even serving as a basis for some classical myths, legends, and folklore. Now, they never carry themselves as gods, but they're definitely not human either. However, that doesn't stop them from developing a sense of humanity. And that, more than anything, is the primary catalyst for the narrative that unfolds within this movie. and it is a vast, comprehensive narrative at that. It covers modern times, ancient times, medieval times, and tries to weave it all together. Needless to say, there is a lot to cover. And even though the movie has a 2.5-hour runtime, it easily could have been much longer. At times, you might even wish it was longer, because the history between these characters and how they carve their place in the MCU is just so broad. And through it all, the Eternals undergo quite a bit of upheaval. When they first arrive, they believe themselves to be advanced beings from the planet Olympia, tasked by the Celestials to protect beings who cannot defend themselves against the likes of the Deviants. But they're also under strict guidance to not interfere with the development of humanity or any beings like them. They may not agree with that rule, and it certainly sows some early seeds of doubt and distress among them. But for many centuries, the Eternals remain dedicated to their mission. They also remain fiercely loyal to the Celestials, speaking of Erisham like a god. And when they're not fighting the Deviants, they're still interacting with humanity, learning from them, growing with them, and coming to love them. But by the time we get to the modern post-snap era, a lot has changed. The Deviants have been gone for over 500 years, and the Eternals as a team have totally disbanded, some of them having not seen one another for centuries. It's only when a powerful new Deviant named Crow returns that they start to reassemble. But this process brings with it some distressing revelations, while also reopening some old wounds. And it's here where the world building and character development in Eternals really shines. Because when we start the journey with these characters, it all feels so familiar. The Eternals carry themselves like many other superheroes that we've seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Icarus is this big, tough powerhouse, not unlike Thor. Phastos is this brilliant, tech-minded inventor, similar to Tony Stark. Cersei is this cunning, crafty fighter who uses her abilities creatively, not unlike Black Widow and Hawkeye. And both Kingo and Sprite are a couple of witty, wisecracking hotshot types, not unlike Star-Lord and Rocket Raccoon. They all fit familiar archetypes, and they seem to follow familiar paths, at least at first. You have Icarus and Cersei sharing this deep, century-spanning romance that ends abruptly, and for reasons that become tragically clear later on. You have Phastos becoming disillusioned with humanity after seeing how they use their technology to commit gross atrocities. You also have Druid contemplating how much or how little to use his mental manipulation powers on humans, often testing the limits of the Eternals' rule on not interfering. And by the midpoint of the movie, you think you know what the main conflict is, and what the Eternals are up against. But through some stunning, not to mention heartbreaking revelations, we learn the full truth. And by this time, having learned about these characters and grown with them, it has a serious impact, unlike anything we've gotten to date from a Marvel movie. I won't spoil all the details. I honestly couldn't do justice to how these revelations were built up and all the emotions that went with them. I'll just say that everything the Eternals thought they knew about themselves, and everything they thought they knew about the Celestials that they served so loyally, it was all wrong. Not all of it was a lie, but it was more than enough to cause a full-blown superhero civil war. These characters have literally spent thousands of years together, thinking they knew their purpose, their mission, and how to go about it. Then, they learned they had been lied to and manipulated. Moreover, some of them knew before the rest of them, and they kept that secret for centuries. It all factors heavily into how they handled the emergence, the climactic battle in the end that is the culmination of their mission. Beyond just being a very personal battle between former teammates and even lovers, it presents a difficult hero's dilemma. Are you willing to sacrifice billions of lives to save billions more? Are you willing to defy the rules you follow so closely your entire life to do the right thing? And how high a price are you willing to pay to do what you know is right? These are all heavy questions that plenty of other superhero movies have addressed, but none address it quite like Eternals. It's never presented as an easy choice or one that's free of consequence. it also doesn't hide how difficult it can be to clash with people you care about. There are moments in this movie when you really empathize with the heartache these characters are feeling. It's not unlike the feelings we got with Infinity War when facing the prospect of sacrificing one life to save many. And with Eternals, the stakes were every bit as high. And in the end, the consequences may end up being even greater, especially considering what happened in one of the post-credits scenes. It's that heavy impact that convinced me that Eternals was a special kind of movie. I really did enjoy it, every bit as much as I've enjoyed other Marvel movies. But this was just such a different cinematic experience. Many have stated that this movie has more in common with Zack Snyder's Justice League than it does with most other Marvel movies. And given how Eternals handles some of these very heavy issues, I think that's an apt comparison. But as much as I enjoyed it, Eternals did have its share of flaws. Certain characters got far less development than others. I feel like Salma Hayek's character, Ajax, was cast aside too quickly. And the same goes for Gilgamesh, who really shined in every scene he was in, but there just wasn't enough of them. In addition, Eternals didn't have nearly as many MCU connections as other entries in the franchise. Yes, they did reference the Avengers and the Snap, and yes, the events of Endgame did factor into how the events of Eternals played out. But beyond that, there weren't many other connections to speak of. It all comes back to this movie being a break from the typical MCU formula. It really does take a different approach to crafting a superhero movie and developing these lesser-known characters. And I think it's because Eternals is so different that it has critics and fans so divided. But personally, I think Eternals is just what the Marvel Cinematic Universe needed. It's a different kind of superhero movie for a franchise that has become too comfortable with its formula. If Marvel Studios is going to continue succeeding as it has, it must take bold risks. It must be willing to tell a different kind of superhero story. And I think with Eternals, they succeeded once more. Critics may disagree, certain contingents of fans may disagree. But as a longtime fan of Marvel comics and superhero movies, I am more than convinced. Eternals is a great movie, and I'm genuinely excited about the prospects of seeing these characters show up again in future movies. Because of the Eternals, the MCU is bigger, bolder, and richer than it was before. And on behalf of longtime Marvel fans, to Kevin Feige, Chloe Zhao, and everyone else behind this movie, we are eternally grateful. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, take care and stay safe.